More than 80 years ago, a British wartime prime minister had famously steeled his nation's resolve to fight the invader by saying, "We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall never surrender."
We shall never surrender!
8 decades later, a British prime minister, born of immigrant stock, tried to win his nation's trust by wanting to fight off the new invaders.
The numbers crossing are down by 20%.
The migrants entering Britain in ever-increasing numbers. Rishi Sunak headed policies that fought the potential immigrants on the beaches of France, in undersea tunnels connecting UK to Europe, at airports and landing sites, and in the hearts and minds of his more liberal countryfolk. Rishi Sunak promised to deport immigrants to Rwanda on chartered flights. He pledged to stop the small boats invading his country. He raised fees and fears as he planned to check the benefits of international students passing out of British universities. All this was happening because in the biggest playoff since Brexit, immigration once again took center stage as the UK headed towards a snap poll called by a despairing prime minister in search of validation.
And we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
It was a desperate move that was marked for failure. On July 4th, 2024, Britain bade Rishi Sunak a firm goodbye as the country, after 14 years and for the first time since Brexit, decided to bring Labour back to power. It chose a new prime minister and a new liberal government, one that is believed to be more sympathetic towards immigrants and their humanitarian needs. One of the Keir Starmer government's first decisions was the shutting down of Bibi Stockholm by January 2025. The Bibi Stockholm Syndrome. The story of Bibi Stockholm, a barge moored off Portland, is symptomatic of the UK's continuing quandary over asylum-seeking migrants. In 2023, the British government had come up with a novel idea of housing asylum seekers on barges, like Bibi Stockholm, to cut down on the cost of accommodating them in hotels and rented accommodations. But Bibi Stockholm created more problems than it solved.
When migrant rights are under attack!
Local and rights groups protested. A bacterial outbreak saw the asylum seekers moved back into hotels for 2 months. The people on the barge complained of lengthy delays in the processing of claims. Whistleblower ex-employees spoke of rancid food, bedbugs, and flooding. And to top it all, the barge, Bibi Stockholm, ended up costing almost £16 million to run over the past year. A cost that was expected to go up to £20 million for the next year. Reason enough for the new government to shut it down.
The new government also decided to stop using the Bibi Stockholm barge.
Cutting costs, cutting ties. Cost has remained a major factor in how successive UK governments since 2016 have tackled immigration. It was an issue that was central to the EU referendum and to Britain exiting the European Union that year.
Country is aching to move on.
Control of immigration was a core demand of Leave voters, and ending free movement was a key pledge by the Leave campaign. Ironically, taking back control of the borders did not translate to putting a check on rampant migration or curbing its rising cost. Even as the UK detached itself from the EU, migrants continued to pour in.
Migrants and refugees arriving in Dover and launching from the beaches here in Calais.
It was clear that the UK needed to think up something new to control the flow. Finally, on January 1st, 2021, following numerous post-Brexit discussions,
Shut up a minute!
the UK government adopted a new points-based immigration policy.
The government is publishing its long-awaited plans for a revamped immigration system.
A system that, for the first time, did not differentiate between EU and non-EU migrants and Europeans, with the exception of Irish citizens.
Immigration plans which will end the free movement of people from Europe.
There was hope that migration would come down, a hope that was easily dashed as the years began to unfold. Contrary to expectations, the new points system saw migration to the UK rise to an historical high, peaking at 764,000 in 2022. What the new system effectively did was replace EU migrants with non-EU ones. In 2021, there were more EU citizens leaving the UK than coming in. By contrast, non-EU net migration rose sharply, reaching 892,000 in 2022 and making up for the net shortfall in EU numbers. Under the new system, non-EU citizens began to face a lower skill and salary threshold to acquire a work visa than they did before Brexit. But for EU citizens, who previously enjoyed free movement, the new system of visas and employment and salary requirements became a tightening of the rules. By 2023, non-EU nationals accounted for 91% of work-related migration to the UK, and just 9% were from the EU. Indian nationals were by far the largest nationality coming to the UK, accounting for 20% of overall immigration, followed by Nigerians at little over 11%, and Chinese and Pakistani citizens contributing around 7% each. The new immigration policy produced a shortfall in skill sets, as trained workers from the EU began to dry up. This was only partially compensated by roughly 130,000 non-EU workers filling in those roles, and Britain's acute shortage of skilled candidates to fill vacancies became a problem for many company bosses. Pay, study, stay. The new immigration policy had an answer on how to make up for the shortfall over time, because the points-based system also saw the introduction of the student graduate visa. This visa allows recent graduates to live and work in the UK for 2 years after graduation and for 3 years after a PhD, and the visa also allows these students to have dependents. By 2023, the UK Home Office was reporting that 34% of migration was study-related. What was left unsaid was the changing demography of even this category of immigrants. Post-Brexit, the share of EU students enrolling for UK university courses began to shrink, but the final blow came with the new immigration policy. In the 2017-2018 academic year, 1 out of every 4 overseas students were from the EU. By the 2021-2022 academic year, this stood at 1 out of 11 international students in the UK being from the EU. The reason behind this was the increased tuition fees that EU students had to pay from the 2021-2022 academic year, at par with the full international student rate. In most cases, this roughly doubled the cost of the previous year. The big problem of small boats. Migration in the UK, as elsewhere, is a complex suite of processes. It not only includes the movements of highly skilled workers such as doctors, scientists, engineers, and even Premier League footballers, but also the lower-paid farm workers, house helps, and truck drivers. Immigration involves international students whose fees contribute to the country's higher education system. It concerns spouses of British citizens and residents, and it is about people looking for humanitarian protection. From the beaches of Normandy in France, elusive small boats slip past British Coast Guard patrols, landing desperate asylum seekers on English shores. In 2022, the small boat arrivals peaked to an all-time high of 46,000. Most of the asylum seekers arriving on small boats now come from Afghanistan, Iran, Syria, Iraq, and Turkey. The crossing is dangerous, and many lives have been lost. But those who make it to British soil become British responsibility till their cases can be individually judged. Although they make up a tiny fraction of overall immigration figures, the invasion of these small boats came to dominate UK's migration debate because there is a cost that the UK bears in processing immigration. Migraine of lodging migrants. According to estimates, post-Brexit, Britain has been spending more than £3 billion a year on processing asylum applications, with the cost of housing migrants in hotels and other accommodations running up to at about £8 million a day. So, in a bid to cut costs, the UK government decided to export the asylum seekers to a third country. This was an exercise that was doomed to fail, and instead of saving money, it ended up costing the Exchequer hundreds of millions of pounds. The Rwanda Plan. On April 14, 2022, the UK government announced that it was going to send certain people seeking asylum in the UK to the Republic of Rwanda.
The British Parliament is due to vote on a controversial bill to send asylum seekers to Rwanda,
where the Rwandan government would decide their asylum claims. If their claims were successful, they would be granted asylum in Rwanda, not the UK. This was to address the increasing numbers of people reaching the UK without authorization by crossing the English Channel in small boats. In November 2023, the UK Supreme Court nixed the Rwanda plan, ruling it to be unlawful, as deporting migrants to Rwanda would breach British and international human rights laws and agreements. Meanwhile, the Times newspaper reported a payment of £20 million to the government of Rwanda for processing costs. This was on top of the £120 million of development funding that had already been paid. According to the BBC, the UK government spent a further £100 million in the 2023-24 financial year on its Rwanda plan. All in all, it is estimated that the entire Rwandan plan fiasco cost the British taxpayer upwards of £320 million. And for that money, not a single flight carrying deportees made it to Rwanda after the first flight got cancelled, facing legal challenges in June 2022. No asylum-seeking immigrant was ever sent to Rwanda from the UK. Firing up the ballots. By the end of 2023, immigration had become an electoral battleground in Britain. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak promised to cut net migration levels if the Conservatives were voted back into office in the next elections.
The first time, numbers are down.
He promised to cap work and family visas at a yearly level agreed by Parliament. Leading Brexit campaigner Nigel Farage, now the leader of the right-wing Reform Party, began campaigning on the plank that net migration should fall to zero. And Rishi Sunak's main challenger, the Labour Party, announced it would also lower net migration by reducing reliance on overseas workers, addressing the shortage of homegrown skills, and tackling rogue employers. After its 14-year run in power, 5 prime ministers, and considerable turmoil, the British voter chose to punish the Conservatives led by Prime Minister Rishi Sunak for compounded errors. From the mishandling of Brexit and the economic crisis to its dodgy 14 years of a chaotic immigration policy. The mantle has now passed, and for the next 5 years, the Labour government, headed by Keir Starmer, will formulate its own vision on how the UK should handle immigration. But it is clear that the divide has hardened among the Britons. For those who are ready to reasonably accept more immigrants, and those who absolutely don't. Those who see immigrants contributing to society, and others who see them as leeches. Those who fear the inclusion of color, and those who accept the inevitable. Hard feelings. On the last day of July 2024, a deadly knife attack sent shockwaves across Britain. The victims were little girls aged 6, 7, and 9. 8 other children and 2 adults were also injured. The attack took place at a dance school in the seaside town of Southport in northwest England. With no confirmation from official sources, speculation was fueled that the attacker was a Muslim immigrant. The UK erupted in deadly unrest as right-wing anti-immigration groups went on the rampage. Days of rioting and vandalism followed as anti-immigrant anger spilled out on the streets. With the police and security forces on high alert, immigrant groups and liberal rights advocates staged their own counter-protests across the UK. It's a growing dissonance that is no longer nebulous, restricted to private thoughts and beliefs. It vents in fiery speeches. It resonates in heated discussions. It pits citizen against citizen. From the beaches landing small boats, to university halls hosting international students, from the factory floors of British industry to the corner pubs. A choice is being compelled as a renewed battle for Britain rages within the country. The fight this time is not to preserve the British Empire, but to define the future demography of this united kingdom.